welcome back to our show, your show, Let's Talk Stocks. In studio with us this morning is Dr. Ernest Madu. He's Chairman and CEO of Heart Institute of Jamaica, and of course, the President of the organization, Dr. Dania Ball. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Madu, let's start with what would have inspired you? What, thinking about doing a heart institute in Jamaica, that's a massive undertaking. What would have inspired such an undertaking?
So interestingly, it was a routine visit to Jamaica, and we came home all the time. And we'd previously been doing mission work. You come home short term, you do a stint, whether it's in the country or you even go to West Africa, you do a stint. And what we realized is that good health care can't be extended in a short-term way. Mission is not suitable for sustainable health care and health infrastructure development. And so at the time, there were just a handful of fellowship-trained cardiologists managing an entire population. There were 3, I think at the time, for 3 million people. How is that going to work? And so wait times were upwards of 6 months, to get very routine tests like an echocardiogram. It would sometimes take you 6 months. And that wait time increased when the university was having exams, for example, for the medical students, or if it's summertime when the doctors are on vacation, there may be no care. Dr. Madu at the time was on faculty at Vanderbilt University, one of the preeminent cardiologists in America, and he thought, this is not sustainable. Why is this happening? So the people who could afford to, and who had access, if you have a visa, you can fly overseas for care, you can travel. But the lion's share of us in Jamaica couldn't do that. And the other thing he said at the time was, even if you could, time may not permit. So if you're having a heart attack at 2 a.m. in the morning, the flight's not running, and even if you have access to a private charter, they still have to file a flight plan. So, like we say in Jamaica, dog very well may eat your supper.
Yeah.
So, so at the time we thought, what, this is a good opportunity to really do well by doing good. If we can extend care to a large segment of the population, it could make a significant impact. And it would just be a good thing to do. So he put his thinking cap on, and here we are.
That's interesting, though, because the concept, and I can understand if you said, well, since people are flying out, they have money, they can pay in fare and so on. Therefore, they can pay for the facility if it is here in Jamaica. But you're not just saying for those who can afford to fly out. What I'm hearing you saying is even those other persons who may not have been able to afford the flight, even if they had a visa, you would include them in this program. How do you do that kind of maths to make it work for everybody?
Yeah, so there's the concept of health equity, right? That comes with, we talk about health equity and inclusion. So when you design a business plan and you want to serve a population, you also want to think about the population that may not be able to get the services because they don't have the means. So the problem we saw in Jamaica 20 years ago was there was no access for everyone, period, right? Only the very wealthy that could go to North America. Then the rest of the population had very limited access to care. And the few cardiologists that were on the island offered a limited menu of services. So even in that population that could not go overseas, they also had limits to what they could get locally. So the first problem to resolve will be access.
Yes.
Now we democratized cardiovascular care by making access available now to everyone. Now, then the next issue is affordability.
Yes.
Now, because of economies of scale, that you have a large unmet demand locally, when you bring it down locally, you actually can drop down the cost of those services that those people who could not afford those services in the United States, now you can offer it at a fraction of the cost. And you see that a large pool of people truly can afford it. And then there's still a segment that will not be able to afford it. Then that's why we created the Heart Institute of the Caribbean Foundation, which she chairs. She chairs that foundation. And the Heart Institute of the Caribbean Foundation, the remit is to make quality cardiovascular care accessible to a large pool of underserved populations. And that's the work of the Heart Institute of the Caribbean Foundation, to facilitate access for those people who otherwise would not be able to afford those services by themselves.
You know, here's the elephant in the room. Normally this question comes at the end, but we have to ask it now. Because, well, clearly you've been around 20 years.
Yes.
20 years.
20 years, 2005 to 2025.
Yes.
Which means you've been able to operate, financially okay.
Yes.
How have you managed to do that?
Well, I think by providing the services that people need in a way that is high quality and accessible and affordable, right? And when you do that, then you realize that you have a lot of opportunity to do good and do well at the same time. So what we've been able to demonstrate is that it's a very viable, economically viable model. And of course, that has attracted a lot of attention. We've been having recent conversations with, financial institutions overseas, international partners that have been interested in what we're doing because we have demonstrated the economic viability. But it can also be run in a sound and inclusive way, which is what we have done, that makes sure that with the help of the Heart Institute of the Caribbean Foundation, those people who are in the most disadvantaged financial position still have access to the same services. But we're able to fund those because we have been financially successful by running an operationally efficient service with high quality delivery metrics and high customer service indices. And that's exactly what we have done over the past 20 years.
Chairman, we're going to come back to that, but I want to go to Dr. Baugh to talk to me about that foundation in Jamaica, where there is a serious issue with heart disease, etc. How do you manage that foundation to really get the care to the people who need it? And I'm sure you have an abundance of applicants.
You manage it very gingerly, in that, as Doc said, one of the things that the Heart Institute of the Caribbean itself did was to ensure the quality of the care. And what we decided very early on was that we would never compromise on that quality or that excellence. So if you were going to pick up and fly to North America, any of the, whether it's Canada or the USA, or even Mexico, that's North America, or you were going to go as far afield as England or Australia, and you say, admittedly, yes, these are the standard bearers. The quality of care that we extend at the Heart Institute should never be less than that. So that was the baseline. And there are costs associated with keeping that level of excellence and making that consistent. Because the other thing that you have to understand is that level of excellence has to happen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it has to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning. and it has to happen on Christmas Day. It has to happen on Boxing Day. It has to happen on Heroes Day. So typically, other specialists would be closed on those days, or they're on a skeleton staff. So you're looking at threading a needle, really.
Yes.
And so there are, like Doc said, fixed costs associated with that. So what we were able to do initially is to look at it unflinchingly, to say, all right, there is no way that everybody in Jamaica is going to be able to afford it. But are we satisfied with having water in the middle of a desert and people are looking at it and can't access it? So what are we going to do? And the thought was, we're going to create a foundation that offers access to everybody at a subsidized rate. And we got creative, and we're able to do that. Some of it is the parent company, who is our largest donor, really, to the foundation. Some of it is that we've, for example, reconstituted an activist board, and they're very creative about how we go about, raising money. For example, we have a seminar, a conference that we do every year, and Doc, through his contacts and through our reputation, we've been able to attract some of the best and brightest minds in the world, the minds that are actually creating direction for medicine. And they come to Jamaica and they provide us with, this is where medicine is, and this is where we're taking it, and this is what you should do for it. And so doctors come and they pay for access to the conference. All of those funds go back to running the foundation. It may be small things, like somebody comes in and they've paid $20 and their service was $18.50, and the staff has been up-trained to, suggest if they want to leave that $1.50, and that goes back to underwriting indigent care. So one of the things we didn't want to do was to take away from the sustainability of the operation itself, because we do nobody a service if we've done this thing and then we can't sustain it, we can't keep going. So we were clear that it has to be a business, and it has to be a financially viable business. So we would still be here in 20 years. But like I said, we really looked at how can we provide those services, the same caliber. Remember, you're not coming in and getting, okay, I'm going to cool down your chest pain, while the person who can pay is getting cardiac catheterization. And so anything that is standard of care had to be available across the board to everybody at every time. And so we got creative. So the truth is, if you have heart disease in Jamaica, and you don't want, and you haven't chosen us, is not because you can't afford it. It's also not because you don't know we're there. So you can make choices, but those choices should be yours. It should be that you've owned the choice that I'm choosing something different for my health care, rather than, I bellied up to the bar and I couldn't afford a drink. So
it's interesting that you mentioned choices, because especially the people who can afford will want the absolute best care possible. You speak about maintaining the standard and the excellence. How do you compare with the best in North America?
very well. And I
think, they have said so themselves, right? The reason that we have been approached for collaboration and partnerships by the best places in the world speaks to the reputation that we have built.
And I see you have partnerships with major
We have
universities, and
partnerships
we'll get to that.
Ivy League universities, across the globe. Yale University, University of Pennsylvania. We ran a conference in 2013 with Vanderbilt University. This year we are running the International Masters of Medicine Conference with Yale University. In 2013, we had about 20 professors from Vanderbilt came down here to join us in the conference. We have about 15 professors from Yale University coming down. I have been to University of Pennsylvania to give a keynote lecture on their invitation. And we've had partnerships with University of Pennsylvania, joint conferences. We're doing that with Yale University, as I mentioned. Cardiology fellows from Yale University are being sent down to us. There is a fellow with us right now to learn what we do. So they have, by their affirmative actions, indicated that we're equal partners. And so that speaks to what is possible in Jamaica. Imagine what can happen if the cardiologists in Jamaica, we all collaborated with each other rather than competing with each other just for the service of the people. Then we can, as a group, continue to engage the global cardiology space that will enrich services for Jamaica.
Interesting. Okay. Would you say that you've added to the scope, the cardiology space? Would you say for practitioners you have helped to improve the offering in Jamaica?
This is such a good question. And I love the questions. I love good questions because when I have an answer ready. All right. So absolutely, without a doubt. So remember when I started and I said there were 3 at the time fellowship trained cardiologists. In the interim, since we have arrived and shown that cardiology, first off, is what is possible, the need in Jamaica, and how a doctor can truly impact the lives of people by saving lives. In the intervening space of 20 years, there are now 16 cardiologists in Jamaica, most of whom credit the Heart Institute of the Caribbean for kind of showing them the way. But in a different way, let's talk numbers. So of those 16, 6 of them are at the Heart Institute of the Caribbean 24/7, 365 days of the year. So we have a resident brain trust at the Heart Institute. In a different way, I would say 90% of all cardiovascular technicians, whether it's echo techs or ECG techs that are practicing on the island, were trained by us. And so these are people that came to us with sometimes only a high school education. Sometimes they've gone on to become practical nurses, and then they come to us. We have one who was an ultrasonographer, but had never picked up a probe to actually look at the ultrasound of the heart. And in the years that we have been here, we have trained solidly echo techs who now, some of them are in practice for themselves. Some of them work in the public institutions. Cath lab technicians, we also trained. One of them is now, 2 of them actually are now in the public sector. And so the truth of the matter is that we've made impact not just in how many lives we've saved and we keep very rigorous track of those numbers, but also in lives that we are touching because we don't know if your life is saved, if you're at another facility, but we know that somebody we trained or somebody we influenced and impacted is the one out there directing that care. And so it makes...
Let me also add that we brought a whole lot of services, new services to Jamaica that did not exist in cardiology space before. And I think what HIC has done has also encouraged a lot of other people to make solid investments in healthcare. And that has enriched not just the cardiology care delivery system, but other healthcare delivery services in the island. We have, many techniques in cardiology that were not available before that are now routinely available across the island, not just at the Heart Institute, but we were the pioneers that made it possible. We were the first to establish a cardiology service in central Jamaica in 2007. Nobody was thinking about Mandeville for cardiology services. Everybody had to go to Montego Bay or to Kingston. We put a full cardiology service in Mandeville in 2007, repeated the same thing in Ocho Rios in 2010, right? And then put the first freestanding cath lab in Jamaica in 2005, 2006, installed in 2005, started using it in 2006. And so there's been a whole lot of things. As far back as 2008, we launched cardiac electrophysiology service in Jamaica with 2 board-certified cardiac electrophysiologists. It was unheard of.
I'm glad you said that word. I couldn't get it out straight.
That's a lot of things that have been done that showed what is possible. We have mentored scores of young medical officers that come to us, and then we mentor them over the course of 12 months, and then they take the exams in the United States, and I get on the phone and make the phone calls to the chairpersons of programs and program directors, and we get facilitation, and they move over to the United States to continue their training. Many of those ultimately will come back to Jamaica. What do you think that does? When they come back, they're not necessarily coming back to the Heart Institute of the Caribbean. That may be the person that will set up the Heart Institute of Portland, right?
It's interesting that you went there, Dr. Madu, because my next question, do you believe that you've now caused a reverse of the actions? Because people were leaving here to go to North America to get services. Are we at a point where we might actually be seeing people leaving, whether North America or elsewhere in the Caribbean, because you're the Heart Institute of the Caribbean, to come here for services?
Excellent question. It's a process, and it's begun to happen. Many of our neighboring islands, Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and so on, many of those places that routinely will leave their small islands to Miami, now looking towards Jamaica, right?
Absolutely.
Almost every month, we have somebody from one of the smaller islands admitted at the Heart Institute of the Caribbean. We've had very influential people from those islands. We've had very non-influential people, come. And so a lot of people are coming. Now, let me tell you something. It's estimated 4.5 to 5 million tourists coming to Jamaica every year.
You're preempting my question.
Right. Go ahead. Okay. Excuse me.
Well, then let's let you ask the question. Why don't we let you ask the question?
Excuse me.
Yes, because just recently, Minister of Tourism was boasting about the record number. We're now at what, $4.3 billion in terms of the tourist spend locally. And you're now saying you're bringing in people to come and access services here. Is medical tourism at all on your radar? This is $1 trillion industry worldwide.
All right. So here is going to be my short answer. Yes. The longer answer is separate from bringing people in. The fact that those 4 million plus arrivals to Jamaica, what are the odds that of 4 million people, nobody is going to have a health problem while they're here?
Interesting.
What are the odds that the number one killer of people worldwide, I don't care if you're a man, woman, pink, green, purple, or yellow, cardiac disease is the number one killer. And so when people think, oh, women, they think, oh, is it breast cancer? Absolutely not. Cardiovascular disease is the admitted, documented number one killer of people. So if you have 4 million arrivals, they come for sun, sea, and sand. They're not thinking they're coming for chest pain, but there's a percentage of them who have it. It is imperative, not just from a business perspective, but we also have long thought from a national interest perspective that those tourists don't arrive to our shores and find us unprepared to take care of them. How does that play in Peoria, as they would say in American politics? So how many stories do we want to go a road that says tourist found down on the beach unable to resuscitate? So we always knew that that was a target, and we positioned ourselves accordingly, which is part of the reason that we get transfers in from even hospitals in the outlying areas, in the tourist areas. So before we even drill down on how can we attract people here specifically for healthcare reasons, we have been preparing ourselves by already taking care of the tourists who come here for other reasons and find themselves in need. We're able to meet that demand. And then, of course, there is the not small market of how do we then, as a country, and then also as an institute, divert people who would travel to Asia, whether it's Southeast Asia, India, or to East Asia. Thailand is big on medical tourism. You're getting on a plane and you're traveling upwards of 13 hours to find care, and we're an hour and a half away. So Jamaica has the opportunity to play big in that. And so, and even to piggyback on something that Dr. Madhu said earlier, in that imagine a country, imagine a world, but imagine a country, a region where these 16 cardiologists who we feel have been inspired and impacted by us are collaborating to imprint ourselves on the national psyche and on the buying habits, on the healthcare choosing habits of our biggest market to the north. Yes. So that's a long and short answer.
Let me just add one quick thing, to this. Let's talk about the tourists that are coming into Jamaica. 4.5 million or thereabouts, in that range. We don't know how many that are not coming because they are concerned about the healthcare infrastructure in Jamaica. By improving that, we can actually have more people coming. Imagine the impact on the economy as well, right? By developing the healthcare ecosystem, the job creation over 20 years, HIC have provided hundreds of jobs, right? Directly and indirectly. We have supported so many vendors because of the value chain, because the things we have to use to run our services, those are businesses being created as secondary businesses because there is a successful, economically viable healthcare model that is in there. And I can tell you that a lot of inquiries we've been getting of late from, international partners and financial institutions always anchors on the value proposition that Jamaica presents. And we think we're going into the next phase where we will be capitalizing on those. And we're working on some very groundbreaking initiatives, not ready, for public announcement yet, but it's been quite an exciting journey.
I saw them giving me the wrap-up signal, and I was about to ask you, what next, for the Art Institute? But go ahead and give us the...
So the scope is that something very exciting
is coming.
Is in the works.
Final words?
Well, I think final words from me are just reiterating that I think every business can do well by doing good. And you just have to be creative and find a way. And of course, that is my passion, but it has to be married literally and figuratively to sound business principles. So,
Dr. Majid.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I think the final word is that Jamaica is ripe for very good healthcare development opportunities. And, what we have done is to show that healthcare is a valid investment opportunity that can be done in a way that is equitable and inclusive, recognizing that there are people who may not have the ability to get the care they need. So as long as those underserved populations are considered, it can be done in a way that makes it financially sustainable, economically viable, and a great investment opportunity.
Absolutely wonderful way to end the program. We're talking about Let's Talk Stocks, and Dr. Madu ends by talking about wonderful investment opportunity. Can you imagine? Well, at the very heart of what you do, Dr. Paul says, having a good heart is very important. And that's why we do this program. That's why we tell you every day. We give you information to make better financial decisions. Come back with us tomorrow morning at 9. Another wonderful program lined up for you.